Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Anxiety RX podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Kennedy, a physician and neuroscientist who suffered from crippling anxiety for many, many years. And today I have a guest who wrote a book called Metabolic Freedom. He's the host of Keto Camp and he's a keynote speaker, or he invented Keto Camp, I believe. And I'm
Yes,
going to talk to him about that. So Ben Azadi, which translates to freedom, you said.
it does.
Yeah.
It does, Russell. What an honor to be on your show. Love your work, your book, your
Yeah,
podcast.
thanks, man.
Thanks for having me.
Same. Yeah. Yeah, my audience is really, and people with anxiety. So it's like, what can we do to, give ourselves the best chance of healing? Like we were talking about before we went on air about how a lot of these programs with anxiety are below the level of conscious awareness, right? So you can tell yourself, don't be anxious, write a gratitude journal, do all this kind of stuff over and over and over again. But unless you fix those underlying pathways, it's really difficult to think in opposition to how your body feels. And if your
Yeah.
body's feeling alarmed, if it's not getting the right food or it's getting things that kind of rev you up in the wrong way, it's very difficult to sort of break that groove of anxiety that so many of us fall victim to, especially me.
Yeah. And I've been there. Exactly. The neuroinflammation, the food
Mhm.
has a direct impact on our mood and anxiety. Absolutely. I agree.
So why did you write the book?
I wrote it because 93% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy, according to a recent study, a 2022 study. That's a
Sure.
high percentage.
Oh,
And
for sure.
it's crazy. It's almost every American.
For sure.
And when you have metabolic dysfunction, it's going to show up, it's going to manifest in symptoms. And unfortunately, we've been taught that symptoms are the problem.
Yeah.
And they're not. They're a gift. They're something it's a body's check engine light to show you, hey, something you're eating, something in your environment, maybe something you're thinking at the subconscious level is creating an imbalance. And your body will show you a symptom to bring you back to homeostasis. And I have been through it myself with my own personal story. I struggle with metabolic dysfunction, mental obesity, physical obesity, and I wanted to write a book to give the masses a blueprint to restore their metabolism so they could thrive and feel absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, but how do you get people to do it? Like, that's the thing. Everybody knows what to do, but how do we motivate people to do it?
Yeah, that's true, right? It's like we're not lacking information. It's actually too much information. And I thought about that as I was writing the book, because you're absolutely spot on. It's not the information that's going to change somebody's life. It's the application of the right information over time, right? So the first half of it's split into two different parts. The book is the first half of the book. It's about the main causes that leads to metabolic dysfunction. And we need to first understand. We need to be aware of what's interfering with the metabolism. So I outlined that during the first half of the book. The second half of the book brings in the solutions that I've used on myself, on tens of thousands of people across the world the last 17 years that have made a huge difference in their life. And then on top of that, there's a 30-day plan to implement what you've learned. And it's a very simple plan to follow to get you some momentum, to get you some wins so you could carry that and keep moving forward. A big part of that, chapter 10, is changing your subconscious mind, changing the self-image, the way you view yourself. And that was a big part of my story, and we'll dive deeper into it. But that's the way I wrote the book, to give them the information, but also give them a step-by-step plan to actually apply it.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to understand that there's a lot of subconscious resistance. I know Jerry Seinfeld used to have this joke about, I go to the supermarket. It's like, well, what do I eat? And it's really now on Instagram. It's, well, don't eat this or you'll die,
Yeah.
or if you don't eat this, you're going to die. And that's we're getting this society now that only watches something unless it's life or death. And you look at the dopamine circuits in the brain and how that we're sort of training ourselves to only pay attention to things when they're dire. And then when they're dire, we create this alarm in our sensorium that doesn't allow us actually to take action. And that it paralyzes us. So, and food is one of those things, especially these days. And I hear that from so many people that we don't know on Instagram. Like, people, equally credentialed experts with quotation marks, say the exact opposite things.
Yeah.
Like seed oils will kill you. Seed oils are good for you. And we don't know, as lay public, we have no idea. We're depending on these two people. And it's just like internet hell when two equally credentialed experts say the exact opposite thing.
Yeah, no, I see it all the time. And I've had other experts even go after me and create these videos. And it would be so easy for me to make a reaction video and grow my following. But I don't think that adds to the
No.
service of the community. So I never do that. I never do a reaction video. And we could dive into any of these topics and I could
Mm.
give my understanding on it, like seed oils and where I stand with it, because there are a lot of moving parts and it's really difficult in a 60-second reel
Oh,
to
sure.
get the full context. And I am guilty of that myself, meaning there's an
We all are.
extracted, yeah, right. We all are. There's a 60-second reel from a 60-minute conversation
Yep.
that says something that is taken far out of proportion, especially when it goes viral. But when you look at the full conversation, then it makes
Makes
sense.
sense.
But unfortunately, most people, they're not going to get the full conversation.
And that's true. And I think, so much of food, I have a friend now who's a doctor in Australia, and he's had this sort of gastric band.
Yeah.
He tried
Like
Ozempic, all that
bypass
kind of stuff.
surgery. Yeah.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. And, just getting momentum of, dropping the kilos and seeing that it actually is possible to drop the weight, because he was so stuck in it for so long that it became part of his identity, as you say. And how you look at yourself subconsciously, you will unconsciously keep replicating that, because the brain is lazy. Like, the brain doesn't really want to do
Yeah.
things that are taxing, that are stressful. So when we have a certain image of ourselves, it's almost easier, and I put easier in quotation marks, it's almost easier to just fulfill that particular self-image than it is to go and change. So, providing the information and making it accessible and making people feel like they're gaining some momentum is just so important in diet and in anxiety and all this thing. When you feel like you're actually having some agency, you don't have to get better right away, but at least you're feeling like you're on the right track.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to dive deep into that some more with you right now,
Sure.
because I think it's everything. I think the self image and the way you view yourself is everything. And you cannot outperform your self image. There was
Mhm.
that book from Maxwell Maltz.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I was just going to say the same thing. Yeah, keep going.
Yes. Psycho Cybernetics, which I
Mhm.
talk about in chapter 10. He was
Right.
a world-renowned plastic surgeon, right?
Yeah.
And he would work with individuals who had these extreme facial disfigurements, and they were unhappy, they had anxiety, they were self-conscious because of their facial disfigurement. So they would hire this guy to perform surgery, and he did a great
Yep.
job removing it. And nothing changed for them. They were still unhappy, self-conscious,
Yep.
and they would literally look in the mirror and see themselves with the facial disfigurement. It wasn't until he changed their self-image that they were
Yeah.
able to actually feel happier and healthier. And we do the same thing in the weight loss space. That's the space I'm in.
Mm.
If we view ourselves as somebody who's an overweight person, like I was for 20 years, that was my self-image.
Right.
I'm an overweight person.
What was your biggest weight?
250 pounds, 34% body fat, size 38 waist. And I can make a conscious decision
Right.
to join a program or do
Sure.
keto or fasting or whatever it is, change my diet. And I might lose some weight, but if I don't work on the self-image to
Yeah.
your brilliant work, I will find a way to sabotage myself or go back to my old ways, binge eat, whatever it is, to match the self-image. I lose 5 pounds the first month. I find 7 of them the next
Right.
month. So I literally had to write on a card, which I still do to this day, the new self-image, the new identity of myself. And I talk about this in the book, writing it down and reading it first thing in the morning, before bed, carrying it with you until you repeat it, the constant spaced repetition, until you say it enough times where you impress it into that subconscious mind, where now over time it replaces the old self-image. And that's when you make sustainable changes. And that's how I changed my life. And I use this for all areas of my life, financial, relationships, everything. It's the reprogramming of that subconscious mind.
Yeah, I mean, so I think so much of our lives, in a way, not to get too philosophical, are kind of predestined, predetermined. And to move off those railroad tracks, it's really difficult, because in a way, we're all playing a part in society, and we're all made a certain way. Consciousness makes us a certain way. To go outside of that, and I think the people with trauma, I think the people that do find a way of going outside of that are the ones that actually make the most change. Like, if you say that you were, well over 200 pounds, and now you're, I don't know what you weigh now, you look fairly
180.
slender,
Yeah.
180,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, okay, you can stay there and you can see that there is actually people doing this. And it's not people that are going, hey, you can lose 30 pounds in 30 days. It's not that stuff. It's stuff that actually stays, and creating a framework inside of you that maintains that, and then that becomes the new easier path when you create that inside of yourself. But it's just so easy to fall back into the old ways.
It is, and see, like to your point, it's your comfort zone. It's easy. It's what you're used to, and it's the most important thing when it comes to change in all areas of life. It's that self image, and it was built through constant spaced repetition,
Yeah.
and that's the way you change it. Now, the other way to change it is an emotional impact, which 9 times out of 10 is negative and it's unpredictable. So it's
Yeah.
not the preferred method. This is the preferred method.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I do see people change when, they have a car accident, they have a heart attack, they get cancer. As a family doctor, I used to see that. I would also see people give up too. So it's really
Mm,
hard to know. And I think just having some success in the small areas of your life, like starting small and building and showing yourself that you can actually do this. And really, you're showing the child in you, because a lot of these mental frameworks were developed when we were children and reinforced when we were children as well, both by other people and then by ourselves. So when we create this mental image, it's very difficult to move off of that mental image unless you have like success or a major life change, or something that says I can't, like people call it in AA, they call it rock bottom, like when you hit rock bottom. Now you don't want people to have to hit rock bottom, but on some level, the pain of staying where you are has to become greater than the pain of change.
yeah. Yeah. And I was rock bottom personally when
Mm,
I was 24 years old back in 2007, 2008. That I was literally going on the internet looking for ways to end my life.
mm,
The thing I was searching for was, how do you commit suicide, and what's the easiest way to do it without experiencing the most amount of pain?
right.
And every time I explored that, Russell, I kept thinking about my mom and the devastation she would have to deal with. And
Yeah.
she had no idea that I was going through this, because I put on the smile, I put on the phoniness when I was around her to protect her. I thought I was protecting her, but she stopped me without knowing. She stopped me from taking my life. And
Mm,
I had to figure things out. And it really started with my subconscious mind, my self development, getting into books. Dr. Wayne Dyer made a big difference in my
yep.
life and his great work. And then Bob Proctor came along, and that was the first shift. And, taking responsibility. I was not responsible. I was blaming everybody else. But once I took responsibility and started to eat real food and move my body and get some wins and momentum, then
Yeah.
everything else was history for me.
And I think that's it. I think that's true, especially when you're recovering from, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, OCD. It's just seeing those small wins over and over and over again. Now you're going to slide back, because I always say healing is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Your ego will pull you back into the old framework. It just naturally does that. So you need something to keep you going up the stairs, and then finding some purpose in that. For me, it was learning how to help other people with anxiety and getting some agency in that, and feeling like I was making a difference. My purpose was there, which I never really felt as a family doctor. I felt like I was kind of just giving out medications, treating symptoms, treating people's, reflux and chronic headaches and all that kind of thing, without really getting into the root cause, because in 7 to 10 minutes you don't have
Yeah.
time to get into the root cause, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why I in 2013 was feeling suicidal myself, because I had left medicine, I had ruptured my Achilles tendon. And it's funny how these major life events can either kill you or, in the cliche sense, just make you stronger, and then just sort of give you an idea that there is a glimmer of hope. Because I remember feeling that sense of suicidality mostly after ayahuasca. Ayahuasca was this hands down most devastating experience of my life. It didn't really have this sort of effect of, oh my god, I see my life now, I'm going to change. It was it was like I felt like a ghost for like a couple of months after
Wow.
ayahuasca. I just was walking around in this hollow. All I felt was pain, and it became the new normal, to the point where I'm like, this isn't worth it. Like life isn't worth it this way. So what I had to do was just understand that there is a way out. I just couldn't see it. And that's kind of the mantra that I use. There is a way out of this. You just can't see it now. And I think that's why people commit suicide, is because they look right and it's abhorrent, and they look left and it's abhorrent, and there is no other space in there. And I think just knowing, and this is again a conscious thought, that things will get better, there is a way out. You just can't see it.
Hmm.
That was kind of what saved me. And, of course, what it would do to my family, of course, and that kind of thing too. So it was mostly kind of ayahuasca induced suicidality, but I have danced with it on a number of occasions in my, like, everybody, when they deal with chronic mental, emotional stress, thinks, oh, this would be better, and
Yeah.
suicide isn't about dying. It's just getting away from the pain.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I was
Yeah.
tired of being in pain.
Yeah.
Exactly. You nailed it. Tired of hurting, not just physically, but emotionally. I remember I had extreme anxiety as well when I would go to the supermarket. Social anxiety was so extreme, just being
Mm.
around people. But I remember when I was in that dark place, I would literally have to call my friends over to hang out with me because every time I was alone, it was just like thinking about ending my life, and I
Yep.
needed to have somebody around me. They didn't know. I wouldn't share this with them, but I just needed them to kind of distract me. I didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I really, you're right. I was looking left, looking right, and I just felt like there was no hope for me. And I just started to get some momentum, and
Mm.
just like a small tweak a week, right? Just some
Yeah.
momentum, and then I started to see that there actually was light at the end of the tunnel, and I just kept stacking those wins. And you said it really well: 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But at the end of the day, you're still moving forward, and that's usually the way it goes.
Yeah, because you seem like a really positive guy.
I am.
That's what, whenever,
Yeah.
I have an interaction with you, it's like, he seems like a really positive guy. And I think in your own life, you've taught yourself that. I think it's always been there on some level, this sort of reaching out to other people, because I think a lot of people who do succeed at committing suicide go into this isolationist place, and it just becomes a self-reverberating cycle, and they just don't get out of it. And eventually it's like, okay, well, this is the only option for me. But you seem like a really, like, upbeat, positive guy.
I am. That's my new paradigm. But
Mhm.
my paradigm before was not that. I was a
Right.
very resentful, angry man. But it's really my. I changed my environment. I changed the
Right.
input. Started reading books, listening to books, changing people, my surroundings, people that were toxic in my life, and my they were not congruent with my goals. So it took years to do that, of course. But now I control my environment, because the environment controls the
Oh,
thoughts,
yeah.
the paradigm, our belief system, the self image, which then determines our values, and the steps we take or don't take, which ultimately determines our destiny. So I'm really intentional with every day, Russell,
Huh.
every single day for probably the last 12 years. Every single day, I listen to Bob Proctor and Wayne Dyer. I haven't missed
Okay.
single day.
Yep.
And I gratitude journal, but I don't just gratitude journal. I feel the
You have to.
gratitude instead of
Yeah.
just practicing it. And I write down my goals. Like, I do that every single. I don't miss a day. I have notebooks, like after stacks of notebooks, with just gratitude and goals. So I've changed because of the consistent, constant space repetition of changing my input, changing my environment.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at the neuroscience of gratitude too. It
Yeah.
builds the anterior cingulate cortex, which is a part of your brain that kind of directs where your brain is going to go, right? So this is what meditation does too. Meditation also builds the anterior cingulate. So the anterior cingulate has an effect on your prefrontal cortex. So how you think. So if you become lazy with your mind, that anterior cingulate cortex tends to shrink, maybe not physically, but in an emotional sense. And you start to have less direction in the world. Now, I think that's one of the reasons why meditation is so good for people, is that it allows us this blank space to not only recharge, but just see who we are, who we really are, without all this sort of dopaminergic input of, like, zombie scrolling, like, I want this, I want that, this would be nice, reward prediction area. The idea that we don't want things. We want the feeling that we perceive we're going to get when we get those things.
Yeah.
Right. So we're talking about the success of our books and that kind of thing too, about how you always stack it up so high. And then, there is this sort of manifestation thing. Like, I will, imagine 100,000 book sales. And then in that, we kind of hope that we manifest that, but we're also setting this unconscious, this subconscious sort of benchmark. And if we're not careful, if it doesn't reach that, we can really start to sink. And I noticed that with my first book. It was like I was so I would check, I would check every day on sales and that kind of thing. And if it was a great day, it was like I had a great day. And if it was a bad day, it wasn't so great. So it's amazing how externally motivated we can become when we're not directed. And that's why I think about the gratitude is the gratitude kind of grounds you within yourself. And you mix that with meditation, you start seeing, who you really are, especially when you get older. You start seeing your patterns a lot more clearly, and be a lot more willing to change, I think. And you're a little more stable financially, hopefully. So you have a little more room in there to actually make these changes. So
Yeah.
that's what I like about the book is it gives you, okay, if you're ready for this, if you want to change, here is some actionable steps that you can take. Here's something that gives you agency, and you can actually see how to do this as opposed to, relying on Instagram for nutritional advice.
Yeah, don't do that. That's
Well, a lot of people do,
I know.
you know.
It's easy. It's easy, and
Yeah,
a
easier.
lot of good content out there, like well-produced
Hmm.
content is what I mean. With the
Yeah,
gratitude piece, you nailed it. Gratitude has changed my life. It's rewired my entire brain. I call it vitamin G in the book, and how it's the
yeah.
most important supplement. And it's not. Um, there's a lot of science that is coming out
Oh, sure.
showing what gratitude does. I mean, UC Davis has studies showing that those who practice daily gratitude have healthier blood pressure levels, healthier blood sugar levels. We know Dr. Joe Dispenza has measured cortisol levels and secretory IgA levels looking at the immune system, and he saw noticeable differences in those who practice gratitude with their cortisol levels dropping and their immune system essentially enhancing. There's a study that came out from JAMA that I put in the book that Harvard published in JAMA. I think it's one of the most comprehensive studies done on gratitude, vitamin G, where they reviewed 49,275 nurses. They were all nurses,
Mm,
and they showed that the nurses who had a daily practice of gratitude, essentially they took vitamin G every day, there was a 9% reduction in dying from all cause mortality
yeah.
versus the nurses who didn't, and a 15% reduction in dying from cardiovascular disease versus the nurses who didn't. But the thing with gratitude, I used to always say, practice gratitude, but I don't say that anymore. It's the feeling of
Yes.
gratitude, right?
Yeah.
It's not an intellectual practice. So I love that you said, combine it with meditation, because that's when you're actually feeling it. Instead, I used to tell people, write down 10 things you're grateful
Yes.
for, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, there's benefits to doing that, but if you just chose one thing and stayed there for a minute, 5 minutes, and just felt all the feelings, you'll get way more from it than doing a checklist of 10 things you're grateful for.
And learning about yourself too, because a lot of people are, especially those who struggle with anxiety, are resistant to gratitude because we're so used to looking at the negative possibilities. We're very big, anxious people are very big about projecting into the future. And it's just so much kinder to your system and to the child that's in you to sort of say, hey, you know what? We're just going to leave this to faith. We're just going to leave this to gratitude. We're going to point the needle in a different direction because it is impossible to feel gratitude and be anxious at the same time. Now,
Yeah.
there's a few seconds in there where you can kind of go back and forth and that kind of thing. But it breaks the momentum of the negativity. That's the other thing that I notice about gratitude is it breaks if your baseline is to be kind of anxious and vigilant. As soon as you move into gratitude, and the neuroscience is behind this, it activates the sort of the dorsal prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that aims your attention, right? So you're aiming your attention into a positive place as opposed to this default network that points you into, oh my God, I hope this doesn't happen.
That's exactly right. You're retraining the brain. And you could explain this better than I can, but that reticular activation system, right?
Hmm.
Now you start to see, and it's a universal law, what you feed energy into expands. Same thing
Right.
when you are practicing gratitude, the more you practice it, the more things you are grateful for. And when you're doing the opposite and focusing on all the things you are worried about and stressed about, then you just start to see more of that. The brain
Yes.
will present that to you, as you just made the case. And gratitude is an incredible way to break that cycle. Again, it's not going to happen in a day or two, but
No.
the more you practice it and don't treat it like a checklist. And I think a lot of left brainers, Russell, have at least I've seen left brainers who are more analytical have more of a
That's me.
challenge with it versus the
Oh
right
yeah. Oh
brainers,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I've seen when the left brainers really get it, man,
Hmm.
they just take off with gratitude.
Yeah. Because we have this salience network in our brain, the part of us that says, oh, this is important. right? So if you practice gratitude, you're starting to create this place where you'll feel more gratitude, or you'll see more things you're grateful for. And you move out of that sort of default. There's a part of your brain called the default mode network, which in people who are anxious or depressed tends to take us into this sort of negative, self-referential place. There's a part of our default mode network called the posterior cingulate cortex, which they think may be kind of the seat of the inner critic, right? So the default mode network, for those of you, I mean, I talk about this a lot, but so people know about it, but it's basically what your brain does, what it defaults into when you're not actively involved in a task. So when you're not actively involved in a certain task, your brain defaults into this. And if you had a lot of trauma when you were younger, that default mode network tends to be very negative and tends to pull you into this negative place. So things like gratitude, meditation, being in the present moment, allowing whatever it is, even if it's negative, allowing yourself to feel it, gives you this sense of agency where you can actually start to change the way you see the world. You can change that salience network. So it becomes more important to you to see things that are more positive and loving than it was to defend yourself. So it's all about, growth versus protection. In a lot of anxious people, we have this protective mindset. So we look more towards what could hurt us as opposed to the growth, which is, okay, what could help us?
Huh. What a brilliant breakdown. Well said.
So I think the book, it's basically, this is how you help yourself. Like, this is how you help yourself in a way that you can quantify. The thing about food is we know when we're eating a bag of Doritos, this isn't the best thing for us. And I'm bad at this. Like, I am bad in the afternoon because I usually eat or have a protein shake in the morning. And then I sometimes won't eat for the whole day. Then I'll eat dinner. Like that's my kind of thing. And sometimes around 3:00, I am so hungry that I could eat my leg. So it's like, if there is crap around the house, I will find it.
Yeah.
And we have fortunately or unfortunately, we have this container at our front desk because there's 6 people that live in my house. So we're getting Amazon deliveries all the time. So we have this container and it has like chips and it has some healthy kind of snacks in there too, but everybody picks the chips and the Cheetos and all that kind of thing. So what I will do is, in the middle of the afternoon, if I don't have a healthy option and I'm hungry and I've been working or I've been writing or something, I will go out and grab a bag of that stuff. And I know when I'm eating it, it's like, I shouldn't be doing this. So what's your opinion on treats? Like, how does that work in there?
Yeah, it really depends on where you're at with your metabolism. And 93% of Americans, we
Right.
want to avoid
Big
that
number.
until we do some work. I mean, you're not overweight and obese. You look like you're pretty healthy. So I'm
I'm
not.
cut, man.
You're what? You're cut?
I'm cut.
Let's
Yeah.
go. Let's
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
I think it's important to find a rhythm where your metabolism is so flexible, metabolically free, as I call it, where you're able to have treats from time to time, and it's no big deal. You use it for energy, you still burn fat, your energy levels are maintained. Unfortunately, most people can't do that. They
Right.
have been doing that for way too long. They've disrupted their metabolism. And these processed foods have a big effect on our anxiety, on our mood, on our energy levels, and of course, our health. If you take potatoes at the supermarket, there's no ingredient list for potatoes. It's what you see. It's a potato. Right. But when you take potato chips, there's 15, 20 ingredients. The dopamine effect is way more from the potato chips versus the potato. Sure. Avocados have no ingredients list. Eggs have no ingredients list. So, simple rule of thumb, eat mostly whole foods.
If eat most things that don't have an ingredients list,
exactly.
I guess is kind of what you're saying. Yeah.
Which are whole foods. Yeah. If it doesn't have an ingredients list, it's like good to go.
Okay.
But when you see 20 ingredients, high fructose corn syrup, chemicals you cannot pronounce, like there's going to be a dopamine surge. It's going to disrupt your gut microbiome, which your gut's connected to your brain. Whatever happens in your gut happens in your brain and vice versa. It's a problem. So we want to make these swaps. And I don't expect people to be perfect, but making some progress and making some swaps, that is the goal, to get some wins.
So what would 2 or 3 things be for my people that listen, like who are anxious? What would be 2 things that they could do that would make a difference to them, like almost immediately?
Sleep. And I know it's easy for me to just say sleep better without telling you how to do that, especially when you're anxious. So I'll share some tips on how to do that. But when you improve your sleep, not only will you burn more fat, have lower levels of inflammation, which balances your hormones, but it'll impact your mood, your anxiety in a positive way. But I know you probably have racing thoughts. You're probably anxious at night. Maybe you're stressed out. I don't know what's going on, but there are a few things you can do. So I learned this tip from Dr. Michael Bruce, who's a friend of mine, America's sleep doctor. It's called
Mm-hmm.
banana tea. He calls it nature's NyQuil.
Okay.
Very easy thing. You grab a whole banana, organic. You leave the peel on the banana, and you just cut off the ends, and you boil that banana with the peel on for about 4 minutes or so, and then you pour that banana tea into a cup. The peel of the banana has more micronutrients, potassium, magnesium, these amazing nutrients that help you
Mm.
feel calm and relax, slow down the brain and your thoughts for a little bit. So that's a good thing you can have at night. Magnesium is a great relaxer as
Yeah.
well. So magnesium glycinate is something you could have at night. A cold, dark bedroom really assists with you getting into that restful state.
Right.
And this might be difficult, but it's a really important tip. Avoid eating at least 3 hours before bed. It's really one of the worst things you can do for your health and your anxiety, because when you eat before bed, it'll prevent you from falling asleep. It raises your body temperature. You're using energy for digestion versus healing. So these are a few things you can do. And when you start improving your sleep, you're going to wake up more refreshed, less anxious. You're going to feel better. So sleep is one thing. I could add a few more, but I wanted
Yeah.
to see
Yeah.
if you
Go
had a
ahead.
follow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep going, man.
The second thing is what I said earlier with the processed foods. So I could simply just eat more whole foods, less processed foods. I already explained how to do that. Look at the ingredients list. If you see vegetable oils, I know we were talking about vegetable oils, but if we
Right.
see them in processed foods, it means it's processed vegetable oils. That's why they're bad for you. If they're unprocessed, they're okay.
Okay.
That's not what we're going to find in vegetable oils and processed foods. Excuse me. Eating more protein. Eating more protein is terrific. Protein is very satiating, helps you feel full. Amazing for the gut, amazing for fat loss. So more protein, ideally animal protein. But if you're a vegan or vegetarian, that's okay. Fasting is great. Now, fasting is something that I wouldn't do right away, because for some people it triggers your sympathetic
Sure it does. Yeah.
nervous system. So for some people, it might make them more anxious. But
Mm-hmm.
working your way up to eventually doing some form of fasting, especially for those who struggle with dopamine resistance, it's been shown that a 48-hour water fast, meaning only having
Do you mean
water,
dopamine resistance or insulin resistance?
dopamine resistance.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm going to ask you what that means.
so it's very similar to insulin resistance, where your body, so insulin resistance is where you're having a hard time getting insulin to deliver glucose to the
Right.
cell, connecting to the cell. Same thing with the dopamine receptor, the D2 receptor sites in the brain. Your body has a hard time producing dopamine or getting dopamine to connect to the cells.
Okay.
So meaning you want more dopamine to get the same effect. You want to eat more processed food. You want to doom scroll on social media. You want to do your addictions to get the same dopamine effect. It's dopamine resistance.
Okay.
A 48-hour water fast has been shown to resensitize the D2 receptor sites in the brain for dopamine, which will help with your happiness. It'll help with your mood. It'll help with some of the addictions you might be dealing with. But work with a practitioner on something
Sure.
like that, because that's
Yeah.
that's more of an extreme, not an extreme, but more of a advanced tool.
Sure.
One more thing I would add, as a simple thing to do right away, is to get out in nature as
Yeah.
much as possible, right? Even if you live in London, or I think you're in Seattle, right? You're in
No, well, I'm
Vancouver?
Victoria. So
Okay.
it's basically very similar weather pattern to Seattle.
Correct.
Yeah.
So even
Yeah.
if you live where Russell lives, where it's mostly cloudy, it's
Yep.
still beneficial. Here's what I personally do. I walk my dog twice a day, and when I walk him outside, I'm not listening to anything. I don't even have my phone's on me, but it's on airplane mode in my
Right.
pocket. I'm just out in nature, saying affirmations, just like being grateful, and it's really such a great reset for my brain, for my body. So doing something like that, where you just go out in nature, you're walking, you're active, amazing for your body and for your brain.
Yeah, I think that, we're living in this sort of left-brained dopaminergic society where, people love to learn. They love to learn. So when you have something in your pocket that will teach you things over and over and over again, but there's a limit to how much, I think it's like between 8 and 10 minutes when you study something. If you can ideally study it for 8 or 10 minutes and then take a break and then come back to it, it's better than hammering away for half an hour.
Interesting.
And we're starting to see that more and more. It's like how you learn is really important. So just hammering away at something, even zombie scrolling on Instagram,
Yeah.
will create this place in your brain of lethargy. Like your brain starts to get lazy. It's like, okay, well, you're going to feed me something, right? You're just going to feed me this zombie scrolling, because you can, go on Instagram and see, you know, Thailand and Tahiti and all these places that, are amazing. But, you're getting to this place where you're so dependent on external things that the internal doesn't hold any real pleasure anymore. And this is where I think anhedonia comes from. This is the inability to feel pleasure, alexithymia, unable to express or feel your emotions. This comes from this highly dopaminergic society. So, you know there's serotonin, which is kind of like, and this is a mass generalization, but serotonin is kind of like the here and now chemical. It's like, I love being here, this is great, you walking your dog in nature, just being there, right? And then dopamine is like, oh, I wish I had that. So the little thing that I say is you're kind of looking at a sunset, and you're going, that's a beautiful sunset, but it would be so much better if I was in Hawaii.
Hmm.
Right? It's just that's the combination of serotonin and dopamine, and they sort of counter each other. So the more dopamine you hammer away, the less serotonin, the less kind of like here and now peace that you give yourself. And it's so important for those of us, especially with anxiety, to have that here and now peaceful place. But the problem is, when we get into that here and now peaceful place, our anxieties come up. So it's really, doing the right thing, eating the right foods, sleeping properly, giving yourself the best chance to not be sucked into that vortex. And
Mhm.
it's so difficult because a lot of us get sucked into that vortex because that's how we lived when we were younger.
Mhm.
And we reproduced what was normal for us in childhood, in our adulthood, and it's learning to do things a different way. That's why I like about the book, is it actually gives you a step-by-step way of doing things a different way.
Yeah, that's really fascinating what you shared there. Essentially, we need to be bored more often.
Yes.
We're
Yeah.
just so distracted. I agree. We need to be bored more often. So sometimes, even as simple as like when I have a lot of meetings like this and
Right.
interviews, which I'm so grateful for, but when I have a buffer in between, I'll just go outside and just sit there in the sun for
Yeah.
5 minutes, even if it's just 5 minutes, and I'll go inside and it resets me. So doing something as simple as that, and I didn't know that about the 8 to 10 minutes of learning, kind of like learning snacks, is what
Yep.
we can call it. That's interesting versus 30, 60 minutes. I
of
like that. That
of
makes a lot
repeat.
of sense to me.
Yeah, you will, and then you'll go back. And I notice that when I'll play guitar, so I will try to learn a riff on guitar, and I will learn it for about 6 to 7 minutes, and then I will go off and do something else, and then I'll come back, and it's there. Like it's not perfect yet, but if I had hammered away at it for half an hour, I would be in worse shape than I was if I did it for 7 to 8 minutes and then took off for 10 minutes and came back. So it's really interesting to see how the brain, processes information, and how you can sort of hack the best learning that you can. Flashcards are amazing. It's one of the ways I learned neuroscience is flashcards. I mean, I have them all over the place about the orbital frontal cortex, external validation, all this kind of stuff. And it sticks in after a while. And then you start pulling things together, and you start developing theories, which I love doing, about why we are in this anxious society, and things that we can do to use our brain, use the neuroscience of our brain to actually connect with the spirit inside of us too. So what you said about being bored, it's great, but when you're bored, it's like, well, this is a perfect time to add some gratitude in there if you're
Mhm.
bored, right? And then you start learning how to productively, I hate that word hack, but hack your brain into doing things that will create this agency in you that allows you to sort of have some self-esteem that keeps it going.
I love it. Yeah, yeah, it all makes sense. I think one of the things we see out there with the social media, it's such a double-edged sword because
Hmm.
it could be incredible, incredible resource. I mean, I run a lot of my business as you do on social media. We get a
Sure.
lot of exposure and information. We get to educate people, but then we get into this trap of doom scrolling. And I
Hmm.
read a study showing that the average American scrolls on their phone enough times in a day to climb the Empire State Building,
Yeah.
just like that, over and over and
Yeah.
over. It's like nonstop. And I mean, I could get sucked in. I could go on TikTok to see how a video is performing, and all of a sudden that feed gets me, and it's like you said, Thailand or Hawaii, and it's like 17 minutes later, I'm like, damn, this got me.
Yep.
So being aware of that and being strategic, I actually plan my TikTok time and social media time. Like I don't just do it randomly. I'll
Yeah. Me
plan
too.
it, And then once you do the same thing,
I have to.
I love
Yeah,
it.
I
Yeah,
have to.
me
I set
too.
an alarm. I set an alarm in my phone. It's like, you got 15 minutes.
I love
Pick
it.
pick your pick your thing, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is. And as soon as that thing goes off, I have to get off of it. I
I
have
love
to.
it.
So it just, and it sort of allows that sort of dopamine circuit, like, okay, well, you're gonna get your little treat, but you're not gonna stick in there, because like it's the law of diminishing returns, the same as the learning. After you do something for a long period of time, the dopaminergic charge we get from it decreases, and then we search for it even harder. But the hit we're getting from it becomes less and less and less, but it doesn't stop us from doing it.
That's a smart move. I'm going to start doing that too. A
Yeah.
little timer for my social media. That's
Yeah.
brilliant.
Anything else that you want to add, Ben, before we wrap it up?
Yeah, ketosis could be really fantastic for those struggling with neuroinflammation and
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, because ketones are, it's not about a keto diet. I make the case that keto is not even a diet. It's a metabolic process. It's been around
Mm,
forever. All of our
right.
ancestors did keto. There's nothing new about it. It's just nuanced or new to some people. But these ketones are remarkable for the mitochondria.
Mm,
And the brain has the most mitochondria per cell versus any other cell. There are regions in the brain that have over a million mitochondria in a single cell, compared to other cells that have a few hundred to a few thousand.
mm.
So when you're in ketosis and you have ketones in your bloodstream, it's going to really feed the brain, lower neuroinflammation. It's going to help with a lot of the things you might be dealing with. And yes, it'll help with fat loss and inflammation. But in terms of like the brain function and the mental clarity, it's a game changer. So in the book, chapter 7, I have an entire chapter on ketosis, understanding it better. The 30-day plan helps to get you into ketosis the right way, and you flex in and out. I'm not a fan of long-term continuous ketosis. I'm a fan
Okay.
of using it as a tool. It's not the only tool, so you use it as a tool in the shed. But those 93% of Americans that are metabolically unhealthy, I call them being in a keto deficiency. They forgot how
Mm.
to burn fat. They're stuck burning sugar. They have a lot of neuroinflammation. So, look into ketosis done the right way, responsibly, just like fasting. It could be a game changer for your brain health.
That's awesome, Ben. Well, thanks so much. Again, the book is Metabolic Freedom,
Yes.
and best of luck with it and that kind of thing. It's, putting good stuff into the world. I mean, we're both doing that, and I love your work. I think that you're doing a great service to people, making it accessible. So just keep doing what you're doing, man.
I love what you're doing, Russell. Yeah, the book, it's available on hardcover, Kindle, and Audible. I narrated the Audible just like you did because I listened to yours.
Right.
And the book, we have a free resource for your audience to get an entire course for free on the
Oh, wow.
metabolism, with
Okay.
exclusive interviews I did with Dr. Jason Fung, Dr. Daniel Pompa, Cynthia Thurlow, and Megan Ramos. And all of that's for free if you pre-order the book over at metabolicfreedombook.com.
Nice. All right, man. Well, thanks for being here. I'm sure we'll talk again.
I'm sure we will. Thank you for the opportunity, Russell.